All right, if you're one of those dedicated souls aiming for the UPSC, well, you know better than anyone that current affairs are like your bread and butter.
It's true. It's true.
So today we're diving deep into something that pops up all over the syllabus mains, prelims, you name it, the Right to Information Act.
The RTI.
Exactly, the RTI. We'll be breaking down a really sharp analysis from The Hindu. It's called the Right to Information Act, Erosion, and the Path Forward. Now, this act was celebrated worldwide, right? Like a huge step toward transparency. But lately, it's all about this erosion. What went wrong?
It's fascinating how things shift, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Think back to when the RTI was brand new, like this big, shiny tool. It
Okay.
was like giving every citizen a flashlight and saying, go ahead, shine it on how the government works.
And he had to answer.
Exactly. Big decisions, money trails, everything was open to scrutiny. The government had to respond legally. Totally
It
unprecedented.
definitely shifted the whole power dynamic, didn't it? Suddenly, citizens had real leverage, a way to hold the government accountable, not just hope for the best.
Exactly. The RTI forced the government to be more transparent, more answerable to the people. And this historical context, gold for UPSC prep, shows you the evolution of governance in India, that push and pull between those in power and the people themselves.
Now, our source keeps mentioning this bureaucratic resistance. Sounds kind of like an academic term. What was really going on the ground level?
Well, put yourself in their shoes for a sec. You're used to doing things a certain way, and boom, this law comes in, forces you to open up your files, justify every decision.
Right.
Not every government official was thrilled about that.
I can imagine.
Some saw the RTI as this annoying roadblock, slowing them down. They came up with all sorts of tactics to resist it.
Okay, so not just grumbling in the office, but real strategies like what?
Oh, the classic was delays. The act says 30 days to respond, right? Some officials just sat on requests, hoping people would give up.
That's sneaky.
Then there was the pass the buck game, transferring applications between departments, impossible to track.
Ugh, the runaround.
And my favorite, the information overload tactic. Bury requesters in mountains of data, mostly irrelevant.
Oh, so they get lost in the mess.
Exactly. Hoping they'd just drown in the detail.
Oh, some got pretty creative with their resistance. But the article also mentions attempts to change the act itself, like with amendments.
Yeah, there were some tries to water it down, dilute its power. One proposal even wanted to exempt certain sensitive info. Big blow to transparency if that had gone through.
Yeah, that'd be a problem.
But these attempts mostly flopped. Public pressure, you know? People knew the value of the RTI, and they fought hard to protect it. Key takeaway for UPSC folks, that is. Public awareness, activism, that's how policy gets shaped.
So a direct attack on the act didn't work. But our source suggests there were sneakier ways to make it less effective. How so?
A lot rode on those information commissions. They were set up as like the appeals court for RTI.
So if you weren't happy with the government's response, you'd go to them.
Right. Problem is, many of these commissioners were ex-bureaucrats themselves.
So they came from that culture of secrecy.
Think about it. You spend your whole career in that world. Then you're asked to enforce a law that goes against it.
Built-in conflict.
Exactly. This tension right at the heart of the system. Many commissioners were hesitant to punish officials for not complying with the RTI.
So the people in charge of transparency weren't so keen on actually using their authority.
The irony, right, led to delays, lack of urgency. Remember that 30-day deadline for info, often ignored.
Became more about accessing past data, not real-time transparency.
Yeah, like trying to steer a ship using only the wake, not what's ahead.
Not very effective.
Not at all. And then the courts got involved too. And their interpretations, well, those had a huge impact.
The courts, right. Didn't they weigh in on some big cases?
Oh, yeah, there was a landmark one. Central Board of Secondary Education versus Aditya Bandapati back in 2011.
That one rings a bell, vaguely. Wasn't it about Section 8, the exemptions to information access?
Bingo. That case really reshaped the landscape. The Supreme Court argued that, well, too much RTI could actually hinder administrative work, even national development.
So transparency itself a problem.
It's a little more nuanced, but that's the core of it.
Yeah.
The judgment raised doubts about people's intentions with the RTI, implying some requests were just frivolous, maybe even malicious.
Wow. Putting the act itself on trial, almost.
Yeah, it's an interesting shift.
And I remember studying another big case for UPSC, something about personal information. Can you refresh my memory on that one?
You're thinking of Girish Ramchandra Deshpande versus Central Information Commissioner, 2012. This ruling said personal info could be exempt from RTI requests even if it was about a public servant's conduct?
Hold on. So even if an official might be involved in wrongdoing, if it's classified as personal, it's shielded.
It did raise concerns about that balance, transparency versus privacy.
Seems like a huge loophole.
While the ruling didn't totally ignore public interest, it did prioritize personal privacy in some situations.
And that's had lasting effects, right? Used in loads of rulings since then.
Yep.
Quite a ripple effect. So yeah, we've seen a real change from that initial optimism around the RTI to a more cautious, even restrictive approach.
So the act meant to hold the powerful accountable is now sometimes used to shield them.
It's one way to look at it. Complex issue, for
Yeah.
sure. And that's what we'll unpack further in the next part of our deep dive.
Right back after the break.
Looking forward to it.
We're back. And, we've been talking about how this RTI Act, which seems so powerful at first, has hit some serious roadblocks.
Yeah, it's a journey, that's for sure.
But for our listeners out there, especially those laser-focused on the UPSC, it's not enough to just know the history, right? We got to get to the so what.
The real-world impact.
Exactly, the impact of all this. How does it actually affect things on the ground?
It's about connecting the dots, right?
Yeah.
The erosion of the RTI, the weakening of its power, it had a ripple effect, across so many parts of Indian society.
Like what? Give us a rundown. Well, let's start with the biggie, government accountability. The whole point of the RTI was to make those in power answerable to the people.
Right, that was the idea.
But as the process gets bogged down, information becomes harder to access, that accountability weakens.
So less transparency, less accountability. Okay.
Right.
But how does that actually play out, in real life?
Okay, imagine this. The public distribution system, the PDS, it's supposed to provide essential food grains to the poor, right?
Yeah, the PDS makes sense.
So you're a villager and you suspect there's some shady stuff going on at your local ration shop. Maybe some grain is being siphoned off, sold on the black market or something.
Corruption, basically.
Exactly. Now, in the past, you could have used the RTI to get info, about the shop's stock records, distribution details, that kind of thing.
So you could prove it, get some justice.
Right. It could have exposed those discrepancies, held those responsible accountable. But if the RTI process is slow, or officials find ways to deny you that information, that whole avenue for seeking justice, for ensuring the PDS works properly, it's blocked.
Wow, that's a really clear example of how a weak RTI directly affects people, especially those who need it most.
Such a big deal.
And I'm guessing this lack of transparency also makes it easier for corruption to spread, right? Like if no one's watching.
You got it. When the fear of being caught goes down, corrupt practices become easier to hide. Think of it like this, the RTI Act is like a street light.
A street light, okay.
Yeah, it shines a light on those dark corners where corruption might be hiding. But if that light gets dimmer, those shadows get deeper, and it's much easier for people with bad intentions to operate undetected.
That's a great analogy, I get it.
Glad it resonates.
Our source also talks about the impact on investigative journalism.
Mm-hmm.
Why is the RTI so important for journalists?
Well, imagine you're a journalist trying to dig into a big story.
Like a real scoop.
Right? Maybe a shady land deal, misuse of public funds, something complex. You need hard evidence, right? Documents, official records.
Proof.
Exactly. And the RTI Act was their key to getting that. They used it to get government data, files, correspondence, things they'd never get their hands on otherwise.
So it was like giving them X-ray vision to see through the secrecy and find the truth.
It was a powerful tool, for sure.
But if that tool is taken away or weakened, what happens?
It's a major setback. It makes it way harder to dig deeper, expose wrongdoing, hold those in power accountable. Investigative journalism would be crippled without it.
It's not just about journalists getting their stories, though, is it? It's about the public's right to know what's going on.
You're absolutely right. The RTI Act was about empowering citizens, giving them the tools to participate in democracy in a meaningful way.
And taking that away weakens democracy itself.
Precisely. We've definitely seen this shift from that initial excitement about the RTI to a more cautious, even restrictive approach.
So what do we do? Is there any hope? Our source talks about this path forward, but I'm not sure I see it.
Well, it's not about giving up. It's about recognizing the challenges and coming up with solutions. And our source actually offers some concrete recommendations for doing just that.
Okay, we're back, and I gotta admit, things have been sounding pretty gloomy about this whole RTI situation. But I'm really hoping we can end on a more optimistic note,
Right. We got to find the silver lining.
Exactly. Our source does talk about ways to kind of revive the act, make it live up to what it was supposed to be. So where do we even begin?
Well, it's not a quick fix, that's for sure. It's like a multi-pronged approach. Remember we were talking about those information commissions and how important they are?
Yeah, the ones that are supposed to be the watchdogs.
Right, those guys. Strengthening them, making them really effective, that's absolutely key.
Okay, so making sure the right people are in charge, people who are actually committed to transparency, not just paying lip service.
Exactly. Gotta have the right folks at the helm, no doubt about it.
But is that enough? Is it just about getting the right people in?
It's a great start, but there's more to it, definitely. You gotta equip these commissions, give them the resources they need to actually do their job.
Resources, right? Like what are they missing?
I mean, think about it. They're often dealing with this huge backlog of cases, piles of them.
Right, tons of requests.
Limited staff, sometimes not even proper training. It's like sending someone to, I don't know, fight a dragon with a butter knife.
Yeah, not exactly setting them up for success.
Not at all. They need the tools, the support to really be those champions of transparency we talked about.
Okay, so what would that look like? How do we give them what they need?
Well, first off, staffing, right? They need enough people to actually process all those applications efficiently, do thorough investigations when needed, and training. Can't forget that. They got to be experts in the RTI Act itself. All the little details, the exemptions, the case law, everything.
It's like a whole education in itself.
It is. And honestly, we got to bring them into the 21st century. Technology, man. Imagine these commissions with a good online platform, you know? People can file applications, track their progress, everything's streamlined, transparent.
It'd be like night and day from the current system, right?
No more paper trails and getting lost in the bureaucracy.
So that's the commissions. What about us, regular citizens? What can we do to make sure the RTI is strong?
Oh, your role is absolutely crucial. Remember, this whole thing started with a people's movement. This is your right, and you've got the power to demand that it be upheld.
We can't just sit back and wait for someone else to fix it.
Exactly. It starts with awareness. Make sure you understand the act, how it works, what information you can get, and then use it. Don't be shy.
The more we use it, the better it'll work.
The more people who file RTI applications, the more pressure it puts on the whole system to function properly. And, you know, don't underestimate the power of collective action. Get involved with groups, advocate for change, hold your elected officials accountable.
Right? Make our voices heard.
Exactly. The RTI was hard-won, and it takes all of us to protect it.
Wow, this has been quite the deep dive. I mean, we went from the history of the RTI Act to the problems it's facing, and now some real hope for solutions.
It's a journey, that's for sure.
For those of you prepping for the UPSC, this is all gold, right? Not just for the exams, but for understanding how this act shapes our democracy.
It's fundamental stuff, really.
Absolutely. Big thanks to the Hindu for their amazing analysis in the Right to Information Act, Erosion, and the Path Forward. Everyone should check it out.
Great article. Very insightful.
To all our listeners out there, read the article, tell us what you think in the comments, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button to keep up with more deep dives into, the stuff that really matters. And until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep those RTI applications coming.